Hi, welcome back to Here's the Deal. My name is Laura Barnes with Leadership Beyond Sport, and today it's all about yay words. We are talking to one of my good friends, a longtime friend of mine, Brandon Roll, who has worked and does a lot in the public speaking space. He's one of my great people, great assets, somebody that I met through public speaking. And so we're going to talk to him a little bit about the benefits of public speaking, especially for young people, but really it applies to everyone. So without further ado, hey Brandon, how you doing?
Laura, good evening. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me. Um, yeah, so just kind of let's just jump right into it. You, like I said in the intro, you and I met through public speaking. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you do currently as it relates to public speaking in terms of the practice side of things, the training in public speaking, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, as we've talked about over the years since we got involved in Toastmasters together, is just how valuable public speaking practice is and how it applies to everybody. I do not care how good you are, you can continue to work on it. Les Brown, one of the best motivational speakers anywhere, works on his public speaking. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing. Currently, I'm involved in the Toastmasters group, Skyline Toastmasters here in Denver, where we met and our friendship developed. I have an opportunity to practice speaking, whether it be giving speeches or practicing table topics, which is just off the cuff speaking. In addition to that, some other public speaking that I do involves things with work, maybe presenting ideas to the board, running meetings, organizing meetings, and obviously speaking up in those meetings as well. Some of it's planned, but sometimes you have things that come up that are off the cuff, so to speak, and you need to think on your feet and make sure that whatever you're talking about, you're knowledgeable on, but you're also keeping it within the framework of the meeting.
Absolutely. And you dropped the key word there that unfortunately neither one of us is going to get paid to talk about tonight, but that is Toastmasters. Uh, there really should be a referral bonus for talking about Toastmasters as often as I do it. But Toastmasters, for anybody who's not familiar, is an international public speaking organization. And it is phenomenal in the sense that, like Brandon talked about, you get practice. You get the opportunity to go in, give speeches on anything really. Like, it doesn't have to be anything specific. It's really dealer's choice. So whatever you want to talk about, you have the freedom to explore, which gives you a lot of opportunities, in my opinion, to try on different styles, try on what works for you and what you like and what you don't like. And your career is not on the line, right? A promotion's not on the line. Landing that major client isn't on the line. So you're not practicing in a critical situation. You're practicing in a space where you can get feedback and insight. And as Brandon said, we met through Toastmasters. So I was an officer, I believe, when or maybe I hadn't quite started as an officer when you and I met. I can't remember. But do you remember?
I think I was in an officer role and you stepped in.
I feel like I was there before you, but
Maybe. I don't know. It's such a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago, but we definitely were sort of a dynamic duo when it came to being officers in the club. And so talk a little bit about that, Brittany. Talk a little bit about, the leadership component of leading the Toastmasters Club and maybe how that has applied to your life outside of the 2 hours the club met every other week.
Mm-hmm. I would go back to what you and I went through when we were officers, whoever was officer first. We'll leave that for the historical data. But looking at what we did from a leadership standpoint, and I remember a lot of these conversations that we had. One of the big words that is in our culture today is culture. And people entering the workforce or people looking for new positions, especially with everything we've been through the last 2 years, you have people who are valuing that work-life holistic balance. And they're wanting to know, and this is a great question that comes up in interviews, what is the culture? Explain it to me. And what I've learned, and I think you would probably echo the same sentiment, is that if you can't answer that question, then you don't have a culture and you actually don't know what it is. And the culture just sort of gets defined for you. But going back to the leadership aspect, what you and I did for the first really year and then even further into the next year when we were still on the board together was talk about culture. put that foundation in place. What do we want Skyline Toastmasters to become? And we built a really great culture that you still see today. And people who come into meetings, first time guests, they feel that culture, that friendly, supportive environment. And that is one of the big aspects of leadership, is how do you define culture? How do you build it? How do you cultivate it? And how do you make sure that that foundation is set so that people coming into your club can feel that, whatever organization we're talking about, whether it be Toastmasters or, you know, where you work, an opportunity you might be looking at of joining a new group, different company, you're looking at that culture. In addition to that, beyond just the, I would say, sort of philosophical concept of culture, from a leadership standpoint, you're learning how to run meetings. You are learning how to delegate. You're learning how to work with a variety of different people. And that's so important in anybody's career, anybody's endeavors that they're going into, to be able to lead from a visionary standpoint, which is personally what I believe is one of the strongest ways you can lead. And you think of the people who are great leaders, and certainly we've been on boards together in Toastmasters where we had great leadership. Mm-hmm. And that includes you and I when we were leading. Yes, I think so. That's fair to say.
Obviously.
Look at it from a vision standpoint, a direction standpoint. And what you're learning to do in Toastmasters is you're really learning to create a vision and then helping people understand, how do we get there, and making sure things stay on track. And your leadership skills just, and I'm sure you would echo this, they just become so much stronger through Toastmasters.
Yeah, I absolutely. I 100% echo that, mostly because it's voluntary, right? Like, you're not forced into it. Nobody's saying you have to show up and you have to give speeches. Sometimes you get voluntold for certain things, but generally speaking, if you come to a meeting, it's because you're there for your own personal development. And so when you take on a role in Toastmasters, whether you're taking on the responsibility of speaking and presenting a speech, taking on the role of evaluating someone else's speech, or having an actual officer role and, a larger role in the club, it's voluntary. But if you're going to volunteer to do something like that, I feel that you're going to be more inclined to step up and really step into that position of, all right, I gave him my word, now I have to do it. And the higher up you go in those levels of leadership within your club or within districts or regions, the more opportunities you have to, again, flex that leadership muscle, help to grow and cultivate the people around you, all through the modality of public speaking, which is a genius concept. And I don't know if Toastmasters knew that's what it was going to be when they started it. I know that it was founded as like a public speaking organization for young professional men just out of college. So it was actually started for the guys who were going to be in the boardrooms, who didn't know how to run a meeting or speak comfortably in front of an audience. And then, women happened and we were like, we want a spot at the table too. So we're going to join.
Obviously a good idea. Obviously. But you learn so much about leadership though, right? You learn so much, even if you don't step into the roles that we've been in at the highest levels within a club role. And you can go even higher into district levels if you want, national level if you want to. But even if you just show up in a meeting and you fill a role, whether it be grammarian role or table topics role, or you just participate, you see how different people lead. And it's really cool how much you pick up on when you're just sitting back and observing, and you pick things like, oh, I see that worked or that didn't work. And it's just in a really safe space, might not be the right word, but I think it is in a lot of ways. It's a very safe space to practice, learn, fall on your face, and grow and develop and get better.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a young person earlier today, and we were talking about the fact that this person said, like, I've been very fortunate in my life that I haven't really encountered a lot of failure. So I don't do well when I fail. Like, I take it really hard. Mm-hmm. And I think that Toastmasters in some ways gives you a safe place to fail, because you're going to flub it. You're going to trip over your words. You're going to forget that you volunteered to give a speech, and you're going to have to come up with a speech with like 20 minutes notice. Been there, done that. You're going to think of your speech as you're driving to the meeting going, oh God, I forgot to write my speech. I don't know what I'm doing tonight. So it happens, but you're gonna fail. You're gonna get feedback from somebody who didn't really like your tone or your style. I remember, I think it might have been one of my first speeches I ever gave at Toastmasters. I used the word shit. In a quote, I said, "You can't do epic shit with basic people," which I fully believe. But the culture, as you were speaking about earlier, of our club at the time, we had a few seasoned members, shall we say, who were not super thrilled about my use of the S word. And I got that feedback.
Yeah.
And it was kind of harsh because I was like, wow, we're offended by that word? Really? Of all the words to be offended by, that one? But I kind of failed in that sense. And I failed so many more times when I wasn't told that I gave the best speech, or when I got harsh criticisms. But I got really good at learning how to not be perfect and how to be like, all right, well, that didn't go as planned. Like, let's move on to the next one. So tell me a little bit about your take on the failure aspect, or the ability to fail in an environment like Toastmasters.
I think the biggest thing is that you have so many people who are supporting you, both personally and professionally. And when everyone shows up at Toastmasters initially, just like when United, we didn't know each other. You're there supporting someone in a professional sense, because everyone comes with their own, I want to grow in this area at work, or I want to be better at sales, or I want to be a better leader. I want to be better at public speaking and giving presentations and creating meeting guidelines, something like that. Everyone brings their own type of thing there. And you have these people who become friends, though. They transition into friends, especially in a club like ours, where we're so fortunate to have such a good culture. And so now they're supporting you personally and professionally. So when you fail, you feel their support. They want you to get better. They want you to get up and try again. Table topics, as you know, there's a time frame, maybe 1 to 2 minutes, whatever that might be. And if you go over, they'll tell you, but they're not doing it in a negative way that you suck. You went over. That was terrible. Brandon, you went off on a tangent again. Basically, keep quiet. You need to learn how to handle that. They do it that, hey, you went over. Just remember, it's within that time frame. So next time you get up and do it, and we want you to get up next time and do it. Mm-hmm. But we think you can do better. And you actually walk out feeling good. You're like, yeah, that's right. I sucked. But God, that's so good. I got to remember that for next time.
Yeah. And on the converse, like, they're the people who hate public speaking, who get up to do a table topics, and it's like, you have to talk for 1 to 2 minutes, and they cap it at 30 seconds. They're like, I got nothing else to say. I'm done, tapping out. And you're like, say more. Like, you can get there. I know you have more to say. But you're right. Like, it does become an environment where, and the other cool thing about it is that, when you stand up in front of the room and you're giving your speech, every single person looking at you has failed in the exact same way that you failed. So you're in a room full of failures, and you're all totally okay with it, which is a really cool place to be, especially if you are a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist. And it's nice to know that you're not alone. Like, sometimes we all screw up a little bit. So, but Brandon, tell me a little bit about what got you into public speaking in the first place, as far as like what brought you to Toastmasters originally. What was your initial why?
My parents are the first thing that came to my mind. And they have been involved in Toastmasters for a majority of their careers when they were working. And I had a chance to attend a few meetings with my dad and saw it in action. When I was living in New Orleans, I had a chance to be involved on a club very, very sporadically, because I was involved in other aspects of this organization. So I didn't have an opportunity to give as much time as I would like. And going back to my parents, seeing them grow, develop as public speakers, talking with them about it. When I moved to Houston, I thought, gosh, I really want to get involved. So I got involved and was there for a little bit. Had a chance to get to know a club and saw some really good things about it as my public speaking got a little better. Then when I came here, I was really looking for community. And Skyline Toastmasters happened to fit that. And it worked out where it worked in my schedule, and the location was great. And that's the nice thing about Toastmasters. There's so many different clubs that meet so many different times. You can find what works, for you from a location and a timing standpoint. But as I got involved in the club, I started to see the inadequacies in my public speaking and what I can do to get better. And I firmly believe that great leaders are great public speakers, people who can command a room, people who can motivate you. And even as a mentor now to maybe a person in the club or talking with different people, I've actually used JFK's "Why Go to the Moon" speech as an example. I was like, listen to this because it is incredible. And that speaks to my why as well, along with my parents and their experience and hearing from them. I want to be that type of public speaker because I think as you get into leadership roles at work or bigger opportunities at work, being able to speak publicly and do it well says so much about you, and you are able to deliver your message in a much more effective way. And it can just help you in all walks of life.
Yeah.
You hear yourself speak. You actually learn to listen to yourself talk. And when that happens, you start thinking, wow, I'm really not very good at this. And this, why am I talking about this? This has nothing to do with the whole point. I'm not keeping the main thing the main thing. Right. But I wanted to get better at public speaking because, again, going back, I saw my parents get better at it. I saw it help them in their careers, looking for community, and then this steadfast belief that if you're going to be a great leader, being a fantastic public speaker has to go hand in hand with that.
Absolutely. Filler words. There you go. So you get really good at listening to yourself, and you get really good at listening to other people. Oh, and then sometimes you're like, Toastmasters should be a requirement for every human on this planet.
Yeah, I believe. I would 100% if I could get to go, force them to go. You need to do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think I ever knew that your parents were involved in Toastmasters, but that's actually how I found out about it, was through my dad. He was involved in a club in the Seattle area, and told me about it and was involved. He was an officer, and he did the weird morning club thing, which is not my style. I can barely put two words together to be like coffee, please. I can't put a speech together at 6 a.m. But he told me about it, and he said, I went and saw a couple of his speeches and really liked it, thought it was kind of cool. The thing that is always interesting to me about Toastmasters is the demographic, right? We've been to some conferences. I think the cool thing about it as well is that this really has just become a pitch for Toastmasters, this whole interview today, which I'm totally fine with. Again, we should be getting referral bonuses. But when you go to things like, they offer professional development. One of the other people that I interviewed for this pod chunk for Here's the Deal is somebody that is JB Braden, who we both saw speak at a Toastmasters event. Mm-hmm. And so there are opportunities for professional development where you get to go and hear other people talk and what their stories are. But the demographic that you see at those, especially as somebody who's under the age of 50, I was like, wow, I'm the young one in the room. Like, this is interesting, which is unfortunate because to me, that says that the people who are choosing to invest in developing this absolutely critical skill to success are waiting to do it until their 40s or 50s. And so what I thought was really cool about our club was that our demographic was so much younger. And I don't know if it still is, obviously, since I'm not in Denver anymore, but having a younger demographic is inspiring to me. That I'm like, you're investing in public speaking. I'm so proud of you.
You're going to be so glad you did this. I promise.
Right.
I'm terrified as you are, right? You're going to be so glad that you did this. And I think that's one of the cool things, not just about like Toastmasters, there you go. We'll say that wasn't a problem. But one of the things,
we should be keeping a counter in the corner of this screen so that we can just keep track of it all day.
And would have absolutely said, hey, this is not any good.
Yeah.
When you're looking at how can I develop my public speaking, to your point, we're not just talking to people our age. Mm-hmm. You're talking to a totally different audience sometimes. Sometimes they're much younger, sometimes much older, especially in a work environment, especially in today's world, where you have people who span, 10, 15, 20, 30 year, maybe even 40-year age gaps sometimes. So by working in your public speaking, what you're learning to do is talk to different audiences. And that has impacted me tremendously because you have to craft it differently. The way I work with one person is different than how I might work with the other. The way I deliver a speech to the audience, depending on what we're talking about, is different. The way I work with you on a board is different than how I work with another board member because of their personality, what works for them, what they understand, what they don't understand, what they like, what they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to talk about becoming well-rounded as a person. That's incredible. I think that you can kind of get that in Toastmasters or another public speaking thing. Because I think, like you talked about, yes, this Toastmasters pitch that we're doing, in a way, there's other ways you can do it. You can practice public speaking. I mean, my gosh, how many YouTube videos are there probably you could just pull up and work on public speaking that you're going to get so many tips on, so much value out of that you're going to see it translate into your work environment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually had never thought of the audience, like the demographic of your audience. And that's a fantastic point that I think I might have been aware of it, but I had never actually verbalized it. I'm speaking to an audience of people who range in age. You know, there's a 20-year age difference between the youngest person in the room and the oldest person in the room. And I need to deliver my speech and my message in a way, and I have to connect with each person in that audience in a way that they feel the connection without it being like creepy. And learning that skill is definitely, I think that's actually one of the things that's helped me the most in terms of my ability to network, my ability to build relationships. The fact that I can be standing in line at the grocery store and I can talk to the 5-year-old sitting in the cart or her 80-year-old grandmother, it doesn't faze me. I can have a conversation with either one of them. And I think that's a great point that you develop that and you're able to apply it in your personal life in ways that you don't even realize until somebody tells you 5 years later, hey, by the way, you've been practicing this for years. So well done, Brandon. Thank you.
You're very welcome. But on the personal side, it is very valuable. And it's not just about speaking well or hearing yourself speak or talking without filler words or being able to connect points in a conversation. It's about being able to do it in a natural way. And that's one of the biggest things I think that I try to take in my public speaking journey and just how I talk is the best people do it in a way that doesn't sound like it's contrived.
Mm-hmm.
So having a conversation with someone that you just met, your personality is coming through. You might up that personality a little bit. You might bring it down a little bit based on the audience. Again, if that's personal or if it's a bigger audience, like the things we went to Toastmasters, those conferences where you see people speaking on the stage, people are pretty much who they are. It's just they're bringing it up a little bit in terms of, voice and their tone and how fast they're speaking. It's just a little bit amped up version of who they are, but it's so valuable to know how to use that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't become you just get up and start speaking and you're just talking to kind of talk, right? But you're actually using your personality and matching it with the demographics that you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had something I was going to say, and I just completely forgot what it was. I'm gonna be honest about that.
That's where you just pause. Don't say that. And my next one is.
Oh, now I remember what it was. Literally just forgot it again. Oh my God, Brandon. See, this is what happens when you're real and things happen like this. We could call this a fail. I actually think it's fantastic because it's here with you and I love it. So I'm okay with it.
Is it something about crafting speeches?
It was something along the lines, I believe, of failure or critique. Oh, now I remember. Thank you. Going back to your point about it doesn't have to be Toastmasters to practice your public speaking. You're absolutely right. There are other opportunities and other ways to do that, but I think the feedback piece is the critical element of how is your message received. Hearing feedback from people, because you're going to get good feedback as well, right? Like, let's not pretend that all the feedback you get in Toastmasters is you're terrible. If we had apples, we would throw them at you, right? It's not all terrible. There's a lot of really great feedback that you get as well. Things that you did well, things that came across powerfully that you should do again, that you should replicate. And hearing that feedback, especially as the person who was on stage giving the speech, for me anyways, when I can think about a situation where I'm giving the speech, I'm connecting with the audience, I'm reading their body language a little bit, and then I hear the feedback later from my evaluator, and I can connect the two and be like, oh, I understand what you mean. I saw that I kind of lost the audience when I went off on that tangent that they just told me I went off on. And so I actually think that it helps you to develop a level of emotional intelligence that, again, if you use it in the right ways, if you use it for personal growth and development, you have that opportunity to really understand, like, this is how what I do is impacting the people who are hearing it and receiving it. And how can I change what I'm doing so it's received better the next time? That's my take on feedback and emotional intelligence, and the benefit of doing something like Toastmasters, where you get feedback from live people, not just trolls on the internet.
Yeah, yes, which usually is not super positive. Or if it
Right.
is a thumbs up emoji or a clap, really doesn't
Right.
tell
You might get a few trolls on the internet after this one, and that's okay.
I liked what you said, but the feedback piece is fantastic. You learn so much right away, and there's some really cool ways to do it, I think. And as people develop their own style of feedback and their own ways of delivering that criteria for that, you really can craft a great message. So it's not just the generic, this is what you did well, this is what you can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good for you. Look forward to hearing the next one type. But when giving feedback or when thinking about feedback on your own, I'll give two examples that are outside the box that are feedback that I actually gave in our club here in Denver. First one was to a seasoned Toastmaster, our good friend Austin. And it was an excellent speech. Fantastic. Really, really good. But there were a couple of things he could have done. And I had heard this somewhere and started applying it in my own life. I said, overall, the speech was great. But what you need to do to work on improving, because it's hard sometimes to find improvements when it's just generic, you need to work on sweeping the corners. And I just heard that somewhere and I thought, that is really good. Like, the idea was that when you clean your house, what do? You focus on the big stuff and you get that. But when you get really good, you're starting to sweep the corners. You're starting to find those little intricacies. So maybe it's a teaser that you give into the next topic, or a very intentional pause that was planned super well and really had an impact on people. So I looked at the idea of sweeping the corners with him. The other one was a person who had just given a speech, first speech. She was super nervous. Before the speech, I was talking with her, and she just said, I'm really bad at this. I'm going to get so nervous. I know it's going to happen. I'm going to turn red. It's going to be embarrassing. I'm just not good at this. And so I talked to her. I said, you're a really good public speaker. You did a great job crafting the speech. It flowed well. You had all the major topics. You had a good introduction. You had a good conclusion. You had a good middle ground, so to speak. I said, the biggest thing is you need to work on your self-talk. Because if you get up here and you keep telling yourself that, your subconscious does not know the difference between good or bad. So if you just tell yourself, I'm a bad public speaker, guess what? When you get up there, your body's going to begin to feel that and think that, and your conscious will begin to deliver that to you, and it'll come out in your speech. I thought that was really such a cool way to think about giving a speech, is instead of focusing on how nervous you get, how bad you are at it, or how you stumble over everything, if you just tell yourself, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, your body actually will begin to send those signals to your brain, and your speech will become so much better. So just two outside the box ideas. I don't know if those make a total sense, but they did when I thought.
Absolutely. No, I think they do. And I think for anybody who is thinking about public speaking or trying to build confidence just across the board, public speaking is a great way to do it. Because if you can be confident speaking in front of an audience of even 5 people, because some club meetings are small, you can have the same confidence in a one-on-one conversation or on a date or in an interview or anything that might come up. And so one piece of feedback that I love, actually from one of our seasoned members at the club as well, and he always said this, and what he would say is, if you were going to give this speech again, here's what I would change, or here's what I would modify. Because it's generally, you're never going to give the same speech twice at Toastmasters. If you do, it's probably because you're visiting different clubs and you're practicing a speech. But I thought that was a really cool way of framing it. Like, if you were going to do this exact same thing again, here's how you could improve it. And using that, you can kind of apply that because you're going to come up to different situations. Like if I were going to go to this networking event again, how would I change my approach with that person? How would I talk about what I do differently if I were going to do this exact same event again? Because let's be honest, you're going to if it's something like networking. So taking that kind of feedback and applying it to a different area has always been really helpful for me as well. But so my last question for you, why do you think, we've talked a lot about the benefits of public speaking, why do you think that specifically a younger demographic, let's say your 20 to 30-year-olds, should really focus on developing the public speaking skills and investing in themselves through public speaking training?
Specifically, that demographic, as we all know, and even our demographic to an extent, you've grown up in a technological age. And what I mean by that is you've grown up with your face in your phone. And your ability to communicate has actually decreased. Yes, you can communicate with emojis. Yes, you can communicate through a quick comment on Twitter or Insta or a TikTok video. But your ability to actually speak and present yourself in a clear, concise, professional way, which is imperative in business. I don't care what business you're in or how lax it is. If you are listening to a podcast that's in Hawaii and is done on the beach with the waves in the background, if it sucks, you're not going to care. You're like, I don't want to listen to this. These people have no idea what they're talking about. It's rambling. It doesn't make any sense. You're gonna stop. But that demographic, the younger generation, is so focused on social media and interacting that way that the ability to communicate has actually gone down.
Yeah.
And you see that where you're talking to someone who's younger. Well, how do you feel about this? And what do you think about this? They can't really craft a statement. Or if they get up in front of a group, their speeches are super short, as you've seen, because they can't articulate thoughts long enough because they're such quick hitting. And I'm not saying that, me or you are great at this, as we know, because we've struggled too with having speeches go enough time and figuring out how to fill the airtime, quote unquote. But when you're growing through that period in life where you're building your career, you're interviewing for different positions, you're talking with different people, you're building your network, you're building your stable, so to speak, to be able to have conversations with people or give a presentation, have a successful interview, even if you don't get the job, that is still going to resonate with the person you interviewed with. That, hey, this person really has this skill set down. And no matter what you do in your life, I do not care. Being a good public speaker is vital and goes a long, long, long ways as you develop personally and professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point that, we and younger individuals as well are very technology based, and it does eliminate a little bit of that personal connection and that person to person interaction. And I would also say that I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, I took a public speaking class in college, so I'm good. Like, I got an A, I'm good. I will just say, like, I was in Toastmasters in Denver for about 3 to 4 years, every single week or every other week. I think I missed maybe 1 or 2 meetings in 3 years. And I spoke at every single meeting, whether it was in an officer capacity, giving a speech, giving an evaluation, just an impromptu table topics. I spoke at every single meeting, and I still am not perfect today. So, and you've been in Toastmasters for the better part of a decade, maybe longer?
I would say close to, since I've been here 6 years. So 6 years, a year in Houston. Yeah, we're approaching a decade, and absolutely I can get better. That's why I keep going. And that's why you keep challenging yourself and you keep pushing yourself to give better speeches and to see yourself grow in areas where you thought, gosh, I don't know if I can get there. I used to ramble on and on and on. Random thoughts would just become rabbit holes, and they're no good to go down. They're very hard to get out of. But now you recognize it, you understand it. And I'll give you an example outside of Toastmasters, getting better at public speaking. So I had an opportunity to, just through a work aspect, I had an opportunity to develop a relationship with a host at a radio station here.
Mhm.
I just asked him, I said, hey, would you be willing to sit down with me one day and talk about public speaking? Because you do it for a living. Now, some of it's off the cuff, some of it's planned. And he said, absolutely. And he gave me so many good points that I take away and I add in to what I'm doing now today. So
Mhm.
for the younger generation, it's not just about joining a Toastmasters club. And if you do, join one as awesome as ours because it's great here in Denver. Skyline Toastmasters, fantastic. But you can find other ways to improve your public speaking. And you can find ways that it's going to impact your life, both
Mhm.
personally and professionally. And I think for the younger generation, and we were guilty of that, I think, as well. Sometimes it's hard to see outside of those lenses you have on, the blinders that you have on when you're younger, and especially now with those kids, everyone is just so involved in their phones that you forget sometimes how to have a conversation.
Yeah. And, you mentioned this earlier, but I'll echo it as well that I joined Toastmasters for community. I wanted to develop my public speaking skills for sure. I wanted to be a paid public speaker, and that's still, on the agenda for things to do in my life. But I found a community. I didn't actually know that I was looking for community at the time, but I found a community. And you and I were talking about this before we jumped on today, but one of the things when I left Toastmasters, I kind of recounted everything, and I left because I moved across the country, not because I didn't want it anymore. But I was recounting my journey through Toastmasters and everything that had transpired over those 3 years that I had been a part of the club, or 4 years. And it was amazing to me that the one thing that had been consistent for 4 years was my club.
Mm-hmm.
Every other week, generally this at least 3 to 5 familiar faces every week. And it became my second home. It didn't matter what else was happening in my life. My friendships could be on fire. My relationship, I went through breakups during that time. I had all kinds of chaos happen. I moved multiple times. I at one point was commuting an hour each way just to come to Toastmasters because it was that important to me, and it was my rock. It was my anchor. It was the thing that nothing else mattered for that hour and a half. That was an hour and a half dedicated to me and my growth in that community that was there to support me. And so that was, again, just the community component, I think, is huge. That I think that a lot of young people expect their close friends to be their only form of community. And I met so many people through our club who do so many different things. I learned a ton in the process. I was like, I had no idea. Like, we had artists, we had real estate investors, we had psychologists and therapists, and I mean, so many people from so many different backgrounds, all there to just grow and develop a skill, which I think is awesome.
It was so cool, and it still is. And you meet a number of different people. And our club is very special and it's unique, I think, because we do things outside of the club.
Yeah.
And so if you are looking for a community, even if they don't do things outside, you still find it because of to your point, the consistency.
Right.
Every week, or like our club, every other week, just depends on what works for you. You're going to find people, because it's such a wide demographic and such a wide stroke of careers. You're going to find people who you have something in common with.
Absolutely.
And you'll connect in a different way with them. And it's just really an incredible group. It's an incredible place to practice and get better. And again, I really wish Toastmasters was required. Like,
I do too. So in closing, I'm going to leave you with something that this is actually advice that you gave me, Brandon. And it was advice that was given to you that you then gave. It's something that I remember from a speech that you gave that I will literally never forget. So this is now advice that on behalf of you and a family friend, I am passing on to the next generation, or to anybody who happens to see this. And I won't tell the whole story. They will have to reach out to you and hear the story personally. But the advice was, there ain't nothing to it but to do it. And it's so true. Like, it can be so overwhelming to show up to something like Toastmasters where you're like, oh my God, I have to speak in public. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm so nervous. There ain't nothing to it but to do it. Just show up, give it a shot, take a chance, trust yourself, and know that it's, like you said, a safe place to fail. You have a safe landing. Everybody there wants to see you succeed. And can't say enough good things about it. I am eternally grateful for the friendship that it created between the two of us, as well as other members in the club. So thank you so much, Brandon. Any final thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
I absolutely love being on this chunk with you, getting the chance to chat about something that's very important to both of us. Your friendship means a lot. You are an absolute rock star. We have a lot of fun in the club and outside of the club, fun things together. I remember one trip to Colorado Springs.
Turns out we're not ready to start wholesaling things on Amazon.
We're close to looking at it, but no, we're good. We're good. It's a lot of fun, but it is great. And that piece of advice, that's really cool that you still remember that. I actually use that in a yoga class that I teach here at a studio this past Sunday. I brought that up. I talked about there ain't nothing to it but to do it. And my very good friend who told me that, he added, because it was at a pretty rough time in my life, go into detail, but it was with surgery and had a long recovery. And he said, there ain't nothing to it but to do it. And then he added, and that's the fact, Jack. And it just makes you laugh, but it helps you remember that you can do it. You can get up there and get involved in Toastmasters and become a better speaker.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Brandon. And I know you and I will be speaking again soon.
Well, thanks, Laura. Bye.
All right.